Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. This is going to be a lesson about Adobe Illustrator. I'm working on a Mac and I'm on the most current Adobe Creative Cloud version of the suite, Adobe Suite. And what we're going to do is kind of over the course of a few lessons learn how to use blend and align and different tools in Illustrator to create something similar to this. The actual house was utilized in this Manatee County infographic that the utilities department used to spread the word of how to properly separate debris especially after a storm. So we're going to slowly kind of piece away at how to create this final look. Now, a lot of lessons utilize templates. I get that, but in the real world, you have to just start creating. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth from the look I'm hoping for and walk you through sort of my more organic process of how I create this type of artwork. So I'm going to hop into Illustrator and I'm just going to go ahead, don't need to save, and start a new file. I want it to be 8 by 8 inches. I think a square is a great way to start sometimes. If you know your final output, obviously you need to start it with that. This lesson's going to be 8 inches by 8 inches. I'm not going to set up a bleed. If you are doing any kind of full bleed printing, then you do need to set up a bleed at this point. 0.125 inches is a pretty common bleed for most printers. That's something you need to take up with your printer. So I'm going to leave that 0 for now. I'm going to leave my color mode RGB. That all depends on your printer, how you're printing. To set that up, I will tell you that does make a big difference. If you start one way and swap to the other and you've been using very specific brand colors, that can show a difference. And I'm going to leave the preview mode. So I'm going to hit create. And now I've got this file started. I'm going to hit Command 0 so it fills the screen. And I'm going to go in and just do a quick save as. I'll save it to my desktop, call it house base, and leave it. I know that's where it's at. I'll hit OK. You need to make sure you save it where you know it's at. I don't like to start the save in this new window at the preset details. I like to do it once I've already created the file because then I know very specifically I'm getting to the correct folder. So that's really important for me. So I've got my layers panel over here and I'm just going to start with BG for background. And I'm going to start with a really pretty sky color and some grass. I'm going to start with my sky. You don't have to be perfect on your lines. I'm going to get mine pretty close. I do not need a stroke. I do require a fill. Start with your light. I'm going to turn it a little bit lighter, and you can always adjust this color later on. So that's good for now. Next, I'm going to create my ground layer. Again, I can always change some of this. And something I really like to do to keep colors coordinating together, instead of just picking random colors, stay with your same color in your tools panel under the fill. Leave the color at its value and move the slider to the color range you want. So I want a green. So now what you notice is it's pulling greens that already sort of tie in, and then you can always finesse the color a little bit more, but that green works for me great. And notice those colors actually do coordinate really well. So that looks good. I'm now going to create kind of a ground layer for my road using a rectangle tool again. Same thing, except we're going straight into grays. You'd want to pick an asphalt color. It's a pretty charcoal gray. You could always go and snap a photo of charcoal, place it in, and use the eyedropper if you wanted. Now, I'm pretty happy with that so far. At this point, you could create a new layer for details. I'm going to make the sidewalk and the dotted yellow line. That's up to you. I'm going to leave it all in this background layer. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to use my pen tool. And I don't want to go center. That would imply that right here at the edge is the other side of the sidewalk. So I'm going to go a little low and just create a straight line. I'm holding shift so that the line pops to a straight horizontal line. Now, I'm going to swap it while that was still connected. You can either hit escape or you can hit another tool. I usually click over on the arrow because that's the next tool I'm going to use. And make sure you have a stroke, not a fill, on this line. Okay, at this point, I like to click again onto the line. Sometimes the stroke controls do not populate the control panel until you've re-selected it. Oop, now I've gotten off of it. So there's that line up there. Okay, at this point you can come in and in your stroke window, and if that's not open, just make sure you go up to Window, Stroke. In your stroke window, hit Dash Line. So I've got a dashed line. Now it's the same color and nothing's happening. So let's go in and change it. I want it to be kind of a yellowy orange. Again, I would probably pull an actual color off of the internet and eyedropper it. Beef up the stroke size. If you want those to be longer, come over here and start manipulating. These are points in between the dash and the gap. So this is a 24-point dash with a 30-point gap in between. So if I want my dash to be a little longer, just beef up this amount and turn down this amount if you want. It's kind of, you've got to be able to play and manipulate until you get the look you want. And so far, again, Command 0, that's a decent base for me. All right, a few more things. I'm going to make a sidewalk that runs along the side of the road. Remember, that was real important in the original because it had to do with the infographic of where to put debris. So I'm making a line again. I'm going to go put a stroke on it of a very pale gray. You know, this would be like cement instead of asphalt, so it's not the exact same color. And I'm going to beef up the stroke until it gives me that visual that it's clearly smaller than the road. That kind of works, and I actually want this to be a little lighter. Maybe even lighter. At this point, I'm not loving my contrast. I'm going to go beef up the contrast of the green. So I know it's in the color value with the blue. If I want to get it just a few shades darker, I can just pull this down inside my color picker, and that darkens the green. So again, those shades still work together. They're not all over the place in shade and value and hue, but there's a good contrast. Okay, next I'm going to make the base of the house. So I'm just starting with a rectangle. I want it to be kind of a stucco look, which is kind of a tan color that's really prominent in Florida. These are pretty common color, so I'm sort of going for this peachy look. You kind of got to go back and forth until you see it the way you want, and that looks pretty good. It's got good contrast. I'm happy with it. Next, I'm going to start on the roof line. Again, a rectangle. Again, I'm using the same color because I want those terracotta and peachy colors to coordinate with each other. But I'm going to come over to my color picker and get a much deeper terracotta. Still want it to stay pretty orangey, so I'm going to stay up in this upper right quadrant of my color picker. And it's pretty close. I want this house to look like it's kind of has a little bit of depth. I'm not going to go into a ton of depth with it, but I do want this roof to not just be a straight rectangle. So I'm going to pinch the top two corners by using my direct select tool, grabbing, using shift, the top 2 points, and then coming over and using my scale tool, clicking, hold, and pull in. And that gives me a nice little cinched in roof. So far, so good. But now I'm noticing I really want to be able to make selections on my roof and my house without bothering my background. So I'm going to grab these 2 pieces. I'm going to Command X them to cut. I'm going to go create a new layer, and I'm going to call it House Base. I'm not going to keep working on that layer frustrated. I'm going to go ahead and start organizing. I'm going to lock my background layer, and while I'm in house space, I'm going to hold Shift Command V. It's going to pop it right in the placement that I've already worked on, which is nice. And before we keep moving, I'm also going to grab everything. I'm going to pull my edges in because I'm going to work on centering everything. That's pretty important to get started with. So I am going to pull these edges in. That will help me center and not shoot stuff off the side. This looks good. Okay, now I'm going to grab everything, even though they're on two different layers. I'm going to make sure my align panel is open, and I'm going to come over and hover until I get a horizontal align center, and I'm going to click on that. Notice there was very little shifting. I was kind of eyeballing it already in place, but now I know it's perfect, and that's what you really need. So I'm going to come back over here and lock this layer and work in my house space layer just to create a few more pieces. I want to create kind of a bottom wainscoting area. I'm not 100% certain what that's called, which usually sticks out just a little bit from the house. So if you notice, I'm going to make this just a tiny bit bigger. And in paint color schemes, it would just be a shade or two darker. You could paint your house whatever you wanted, but this is what we're going to go with. And move that more into center. Great. Happy so far. Now, make sure we're hitting save. That's so important. And at this point, we've just used some basic shapes, some basic organizing system just to get this set up and ready to go. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and stop the video now, and in the next lesson, I will show you how to add some more details and use more tools, such as the blend tool in Illustrator.